Hello, everyone, and welcome now to Guns of Infinity. So, this will be the second game in the series, and I think I did mention it once before that there's actually 5 games planned actually in the series, and that's going to include some other games as well, some spin-offs and things like that. So, yeah, this is going to be a pretty long series. This episode, I mean, not this episode, but the second game is actually a lot longer, I think, if I remember correctly, this one is a lot longer than the first game, and I do think it's gonna last for a little bit longer. It might go probably about the length of the life and suffering of Sir Bronte, but we'll see how it goes, and we'll see, how long it takes. I do think I will do longer videos in order to try and condense the amount of time that or the amount of episodes for this series. But yeah, we'll be picking up where we left off. And I think I will go ahead and make a new playlist for this. First, I was going to throw it in the Sabres of Infinity playlist, but I think it'll be best to just go ahead and separate each one. And of course, when Lords of Infinity, when I get around to the Lords of Infinity demo, then I'll go ahead and make a new playlist for that as well. So, anywho, we can look at our previous stats. Everything is going to be pretty much the same. I will have the music in the background, as you probably can hear right now. But as far as like the gameplay quote unquote, it'll be pretty much the same. It'll be reading. Of course, I'll be looking over the stats. Now, the game does warn you that because of the different situation, and of course, because you're in a higher, I guess you can say a higher class now, that you're a knight and stuff like that, it does bring some of your stats down. And I think the only one it brought down was the reputation. Your reputation is now at 50%. And but everything else is pretty much the same. So my idealism is a 51%. Ruthlessness is at 7%. Mercy is at 93%. But as far as my actual stats, it's pretty much the same. I think my soldiering went down a little bit. My charisma is down a little bit. My intellect is pretty much the same. And yeah, and I have 580 as far as my wealth goes. My income is at 30. And I am a Knight of the Red, having the right to wear Bane-hardened armor and wield a Bane-rune sword. I am in charge of the 6th Squadron Royal Dragoons. My senior NCO is Staff Sergeant Lanzarel, everyone's favorite with the lovely sideburns. My discipline is at a 30, morale is at a 35, loyalty is at a 40, and my strength right now, or their strength, is at 100%. And of course, the reason why this is lower is because in the last episode of Sabres of Infinity, there was a huge battle and a lot of people died. And of course, because I have a higher rank, I have more people coming in. There are a lot of fresh recruits coming in. I still have my decorations and honors right here. Let's see. I have the Griffin of Rendelware. I have the Cross of St. Jerome and the Meritorious Service Order. Those haven't changed at all. And the state of the war, I think it is pretty much the same. Yeah, it's a different area this time, but yeah. Let's see. Late spring 607, leading the bulk of the Tierran forces in Antar, the Duke of Wolfram fights a larger Antari army led by Prince Mikhail of Korobirit in a set-piece battle north of the town of Blagia. The Antari score a decisive victory, killing the Duke of Wolfram, many of his senior staff, and nearly 3,000 Tierran soldiers. The battered remnants of the Duke of Wolfram's army retreats to Noringia. King Miguel of Tierra arrives in Antar to take personal command, leaving the Earl of Wetham to lead the government in his stead. Starved of supplies and reinforcements by the machinations of his rivals within the League Congress, Prince Corbett is forced to halt his advance in Noringia. For the purpose of replacing the men lost at Blagia, the king orders the beginning of limited conscription. Vagabonds, debtors, and the unemployed are now liable to be forced into the army by recruiting agents in Tierra to be sent to Antar. So, definitely not a victory. However, it was a Pyrrhic victory for the League of Antar. They paid a heavy toll for that victory. So, and you'll see as this story goes on that, yeah, we will do whatever it takes in order to win. I do remember in my playthrough off camera and stuff like that, then this was years ago, it got pretty bad. It got pretty bad. I do remember that in the second game, in this game, there was one particular battle where things went awry, and of course I had to go all the way back to the first game and change my stats because, good God, I literally put myself in a situation where I was screwed. So, and then as the game went along and I did better, The ending was, yeah, things turned out different, but we had to do a lot of shady things in order to turn around and win that victory. But it just goes to show you just how different these playthroughs can be. So, anywho, here's the service record of Captain Darren de Dracon, KCSJ. I'm not sure what that means. Born in the year 584 to House Dracon, holders of a barony sworn to the Earl of Crittenden. Entered service in the spring of 602, soon after the outbreak of war with Antar, as a cornet of the Royal Dragoons with a commission purchased at the cost of 800 crowns. Proceeded to Antar aboard HMS Victorious, 44 guns, Captain R. Walken commanding, awarded the Cross of St. Jerome for leading a boarding action en route. Assigned to detach duty under the command of Captain Sir E. de Hunter, Grenadiers. Was given a 6-man patrol and took on Sergeant S. Lanzaro as second in command. Took part in a successful action against an Antari force at the Karen River Bridge and was awarded the Griffin of Rindaware for personal gallantry autumn 602. Became an associate of Captain D. de Leaf, Grenadiers. I'm not even going to try and say that. Took part in a relief of outposts commanded by Lieutenant M. de Caracourt, White Rose Lancers, and censured Lieutenant Caracourt's incompetence. Acquired a promotion to lieutenant in the spring of 604. Served on the regimental staff of His Grace the Duke of Canaris, Colonel-in-Chief, Royal Dragoons after promotion. Was given command of 6th Troop, 3rd Squadron Royal Dragoons the next year. Sergeant Lanzaro promoted to Staff Sergeant at the same time. Was recalled to the main force of 3rd Squadron Royal Dragoons, then under the command of Captain D. de Elson in early 607. Won a Meritorious Service Order following a successful action against Antari Cavalry in spring of 607. Attended the reception of His Grace the Duke of Wolfram, Lieutenant General Counselor Militant, that same year. Served with great distinction at the Battle of Blagia, holding the castle of Blagia and the extreme left flank of the Tyrian line against heavy Antari attack, in joint command with Lieutenant C. de Casarosta. Was promoted to captain and made knight companion of the Order of St. Joshua alongside C. de Casarosta by royal order that same year. Note, your character's reputation tribute has been scaled down to represent the greater scope of the story, and the fact that he is now judged as a man of some importance by persons of great power. Would you like to continue the story of this Dragoon officer? So you will get this every single time you upload a save. You can also go ahead and start a save at the beginning and just make decisions, the key decisions in the game to give you a scaled down version of everything. You can save it, I believe, on whichever device you have, or you can just upload it to the Choice of website. You type in your email address and it'll upload the saves and stuff. I have several saves. Matter of fact, I think I could probably show that, but then again, I might have to cut some stuff out because of my own personal information that I have on here and stuff like that. Give me a second. I will try and show that off. All right, so yeah, after you turn around and type in your information or whatever for your saves, then this will come up. And as you can see, I have played this game quite a bit, but as you can also see, the last time I played this game before now was in 2016. That was a lifetime ago. My God, 5 years. But yeah, that was the last time I played it. And yeah, I have several different playthroughs. I have Darren the Daring for gun. Well, that's the first one. That's the second one. Darren the Deceiver, which was the different playthrough where things went awry. This is a modded file that I've done recently. The stats on it are absolutely ridiculous. And it is meant to be absolutely ridiculous. So there's no point in using that one. And of course, there's the one for here. Oh, and this was one I actually did. I wanted to try and play with an older character. I think in this one, I'm like 30 or 40, if I'm not mistaken. So I was just curious on how that would play out in the later games, because of course, there's a lot of time that passes between these games. I think 6 years goes by relatively quickly in the first game. And then there's more things happening as well. And then of course, there's a different amount of time in the other ones as well. But yeah, just go ahead and bring this up and go back to my old file, or the file that I'm using for this playthrough on the channel. And yes, let's continue the story of this Dragoon. You can change the name of your character if you want to. Of course, I'm not going to be doing that. And yeah, and I get an achievement for that as well. So always wonderful. All right. Okay, chapter 1, wherein the cavalry officer newly promoted leads his squadron into its first battle. Wake up, sir. You open your eyes as you are shaken awake by a dark blur. Blinking the last shreds of sleep from your mind, the sensations of the outside world flood in. The light of the rising sun, the hard surface of the forest floor pressing through the cloth of your bedrobe, the bite of the crisp air of southern Antar. In a short, drowsy moment, the dark blur resolves itself into the shape of a man, one wearing the same green-gray tunic as you, Staff Sergeant Landrel. A man who has served as your senior non-commissioned officer since your very first command all those years ago, the one who followed you as you were promoted twice, and the one who stood by your side at the butcher's yard that was the Battle of Blagia barely 4 months ago. Blagia. On that horrible day, the Royal Tierran army had crumpled under the relentless assault of Prince Corbiritz and Tari. The king's army lost 3,000 men, including some of its best officers and its finest general. It was also the day of your finest hour, the day that you held the ruined castle on the Tierran flank against an Antari assault, outnumbered 10 to 1. The king promoted you to captain and made you a Knight of the Red for that brief moment of courage. Damn it, sir, wake up. You push yourself upright, the quickest way to assure your senior NCO that you are indeed awake. What is it, Lanzaro? Lanzaro responds with a thin slash of a smile, a hunter's smile. Well, sir, we've found him. A few minutes later, you find yourself hidden in the underbrush of southern Antar's primordial forest, peering into your spyglass, the 200 men of 6th Squadron Royal Dragoons waiting crouched behind you. Lieutenant Colonel Morris had led 6th Squadron into battle at Blagia. He did not lead them out again. Only a handful of the flamboyant Lieutenant Colonel's men avoided death or capture that day, and those few, along with the men you brought with you from your previous command, made the hard core of veterans around which 6th Squadron, your squadron, rebuilt itself. Those bold, hard-bitten men had not been pleased with their new commander. Hero, no. To them, you were still an upstart with the king's favor and damned little else. You've had little time to convince them otherwise, but as contemptuous as they might be of your authority, they are still disciplined veterans, especially compared to the rest of the squadron. For every veteran of Blagia under your command, 6 or 7 are raw replacements. Even worse, they are unsuitable replacements. When Antar first declared war, it was the boldest and brightest who volunteered for the king's army. They were led and trained by the professional NCOs of the peacetime army. Now, after more than 5 years of war, most of those men are dead. Those who had replaced them were convicts, debtors, vagrants, men who would do anything for a bed and a meal, even consign themselves to the hard life of a common soldier. Now, most of those men are dead too. It is their replacements that now make up most of your command, conscripts. For all of its history, the unified kingdom of Tierra had been defended by a volunteer army and navy. Now, after the disastrous losses at Blagia, the young King Miguel has ordered the unthinkable. More than half the men in your squadron are here, not of their own volition, but through bare, ugly coercion. Worst of all, you've almost no junior officers and NCOs to command them. The Royal Dragoons lost 2/3 of its lieutenants, cornets, and sergeants at Blagia, and many of the survivors, yourself included, were promoted. Now, only you, Lanzaro, and 2 or 3 NCOs run a force which normally would require at least a dozen commissioned officers and NCOs. There, Lanzaro exclaims, pointing in the distance. You see it? You point your glass in the direction of your sergeant's finger, and you do indeed see it. A cloud of dust moving down the bright, chalky ribbon of the Imperial Highway ahead of you. At its head, a fluttering of red and white, the double eagle banner of the League of Antar, the enemy. You glance behind you, taking another look at the men whom you officially command. They are half-trained, unhardened, and lack even their barest complement of junior officers. Some disdain you, while others save their hate for their government you represent, the one that dragged them out of their homes and sent them to this land across the sea to die. Only a few have the barest scrap of respect for you, and now you are to lead them to battle for the first time. Over the next few minutes, you watch the approaching mass until you can pick out the shapes of men and horses. The Antari force is 300 strong. They are led by a vanguard of wild-eyed light cavalry, their felt vests and fur shakos aglitter with gold and steel, their belts crammed with sabers and pistols. Behind them are a ragged column of Antari peasant levies, serfs with improvised weapons, minimal training, and even less fighting spirit. Only fear of the bane-blooded overlords drive them onward. The enemy outnumbers you 3-2, but they've none of their vaunted church hussars with them, a large raiding party, no more. Though Prince Corbett was able to defeat the Tierran army at the field of Blogia, his forces had been bled hard enough to be unable to push you and your fellow Tierrans into the sea. For the past few months, the Lords of the League Congress have satisfied themselves with raiding the small strip of Antari land under Tierran occupation. Nevertheless, your men are mostly untested and certainly unused to fighting under your command. Though your dragoons are likely better drilled than much of the Antari force, there's no guarantee you could secure victory in a simple head-on engagement. How will you fight this battle? And of course, when these things happen, it comes down to stats. So I'm going to be using my mind, of course, because in this playthrough, my smarts are a lot better than my actual fighting or anything like that, or my charisma. So I'll stick to my intelligence. So with cunning, I'll lure the enemy into an ambush. You quickly cook up a plan to lure the Antari into an ambush and begin putting it into action. The basic idea is a simple one. You will dismount and stand in the middle of the road with a small portion of your men, enough to lure the Antari in close. Then the majority of your unit, hidden in the woods, will open fire upon the enemy at close range with their carbines. Despite the simplicity of your plan, getting it into motion before the Antari get close is another matter. There are few dragoons willing to volunteer to act as the bait, even though you plan to stand alongside them. With time running short, you are forced to simply order 36 entirely unenthusiastic dragoons to follow you while the rest set up firing positions under Lanzerl. No sooner is your trap set do the lead horsemen of the Antari column ride into view. The enemy horsemen spur their mounts to a gallop and roar their battle cries, their mustaches abristle, sabers twirling and flashing silver in the morning sun. Beside you, the men stand trembling, their hands gripping their sabers so tightly that their knuckles turn white. You pray that they will stand firm. The Antari horsemen are at full charge now, leaving their supporting infantry far behind. They are still 100 meters away from you when you hear Lanzerl give the order to fire. The air crackles with musketry and the forest to your right floods with powder smoke as the vast majority of your squadron give fire. Most of the men under your command are mediocre shots at best, but the short-barreled rifled carbines of your dragoons are far more accurate than the smooth-bore muskets of the line infantry. At less than 50 meters, at a target the size of a mounted man in profile, they could hardly miss. Only a handful of Antari horsemen ride out of the smoke. Despite their horrific losses, the enemy cavalry are still dead set upon charging home. Your men lose their nerve. Perhaps they expected the Antari horsemen to turn back, or for the single volley to kill all of them. Either way, the men alongside you are breaking. Some clutch their weapons tight as they flee, while others simply drop them onto the road. Those men will not outrun the Antari not on foot. Standing together, you would have been able to repulse the handful of Antari still in their saddles. Fleeing individually, they are nothing more than targets. There is also a more pressing concern. With your men fleeing, you stand alone. While the next volley from the rest of your squadron may wipe out the remaining enemy horsemen, it will take your men half a minute to prepare for it. The Antari will be upon you long before then. What do? Well, I could face those Antari horsemen alone. Let's not do that. I save my fleeing men and my own life with some quick thinking. Or I'll rally my fleeing men and face the Antari. I will again stick to my thinking self and see if that will work. You have very little knowledge of the Antari language, but what few words you have picked up are appropriately soldierly. You taunt the oncoming Antari in what you hope is a suitably foul combination of words in their foreign tongue. Some of the Antari continue chasing your men, but most swerve towards you instead. You have their attention now, and you plan to exploit it. You run for the side of the road, and hoping that the Antari light cavalry have more temper than brains, you duck into the forest. The Antari chasing you realize what you're doing, but it is too late. A horse at full charge cannot be stopped easily, especially when it has just been run into the thick and uneven ground of a primordial forest. There's a mighty crash as one of the pursuing horses trips over a root or log or some other obstacle on the rough ground, sending its rider flying. Another soon follows, smashing head first against a tree trunk. A third horse steps into a hidden crevice, and a dry, tender crack of breaking bone echoes through the trees. The last rider turns around, shouting in frustration, stopping only long enough to rescue the rider of the lamed horse before beating a hasty retreat from the forest. You look around as the haze of the battle clears and see the last of the Antari horsemen retreating back up the road. The men with you have been savaged. Many are wounded and only a few are still on their feet. Only your quick thinking and valor were able to stop the Antari from killing more. However, now is no time to rest. The Antari infantry are still on the advance, and their sheer numbers will be more than enough to overwhelm a few wounded, reeling, exhausted dragoons. With the rest of your squadron scattered throughout the woods, you've not the men or the resources to secure victory today. Hesitantly, you regroup with the rest of your squadron in the woods. The mood there is clear. After seeing the slaughter which the Antari worked upon the men with you, none of them have a wish to face the enemy again today. No matter how much you might want to try again, retreat is the only real option, and so retreat you do. You and your men mount up and withdraw back down the old Imperial Highway, the cheers of the victorious Antari fading into the distance. So yeah, because we have so few experienced soldiers, we're going to take some losses, and it's going to be hard to try and get these men organized. On the long ride back south to the safety of the main army's camp in Thuringia, your staff sergeant rides up to your positions at the front of the column, his mood no doubt as foul as his expression. Damn these stupid bastards, he scowls. Damn their insolence, damn their cowardice, damn their ineptitude. Today was ours, damn it. Your plan was good, but these men couldn't be trusted to guard a latrine ditch, let alone win a battle. Let's see. I'm sure these men will sort themselves out eventually. You're right, Staff Sergeant. Changes need to be made. Perhaps I should make some examples then. Punish a few to encourage the others. Not going to start off with that because, yeah, might not be the best thing to do in this situation, especially since I don't have the charisma to kind of like smooth things over. You're right, Staff Sergeant. Changes need to be made. I trust Lansrell. Your Staff Sergeant smiles and nods. Lansrell tosses a concerned look back at the men behind you. Look, sir, those men are in want of a lot of things, but what they need the most are leaders. There's nothing we can do about the lack of commissioned officers in the squadron, but there are a few of the newcomers that'll make good corporals, and 2 or 3 of the old lot who manage all right as sergeants. Give the word and I'll give them the stripes. Yeah, very good, Staff Sergeant. See that it is done. Your senior NTO flashes you a bare-teethed smile. I'll start as soon as we get back, sir. He snaps a quick salute at you as he orders his horse to fall back in line behind yours. You lean back in your saddle and squint into the setting sun as you are once again left alone at the front of the column. Despite your losses today, you are glad that you are at least still alive and that the majority of your men live as well. It is a thought that will have to do the job of cheering you as you and your squadron make the 3-day ride back to the army headquarters at Thuringia. At the beginning of each new chapter, your progress is saved. Should you come to a terminally unsatisfactory conclusion, you may choose to return to this point of the story. So yeah. But yeah, this is going to be a hard fought war, and honestly, it's one of those things where, like, even if we were to win this war, the things that could happen later on, I'm very curious to see what this story is going to turn out. So, chapter 2, wherein the cavalry officer trains his squadron of Royal Dragoons. Let's see if there's been any change in the state of the war, shall we? Nope, there has been no change in that. It'll probably be a few chapters, so I'll probably wait to probably chapter 3 or 4 or something before we actually start looking into that and seeing if things change. And honestly, I mean, we're just kind of training our own troops and stuff and getting used to the new game. So it'll probably be a while before we actually start seeing any real combat or anything like that. I see. A most unfortunate outcome, Sir Darren. His Grace, the Duke of Canaris, a general of brigade in the army of His Tierran Majesty, Miguel de Rindaware, turns himself toward the light filtering through the open window to his side. arm muscles bulging with exertion as his hands clumsily maneuver his wheelchair around the massive oaken desk. Canaris had been a colonel and in command of your regiment at Blagia when an Antari lance point severed his spine. Jesus. Now his body is dead below the waist, and you doubt that even his appointment to brigade command could sweeten that bitter news. He is in command of all the king's cavalry, as well as being colonel of the Royal Dragoons, which explains exactly why you are standing before him, giving your account of your ill-fated clash with the Antari not 3 days ago. You were hard pressed. I suppose this sort of thing was to be expected, he remarks as he stares out the window, the sunlight catching on the sparse gray hairs in his unfashionably full beard. Indeed, I would think that it was your quick thinking that kept your losses as low as they were. Canaris favors you with a gentle smile, the sort which you might even consider fatherly. Surely you cannot shoulder all the blame. Let me see. We've already identified the root causes, and my staff sergeant is already working on it, which is true, and I think that's the best thing we can do. Just complaining about it isn't going to do much good here. Yeah. None of these. I don't really like these except for this. So let's just move on. And I'm not taking responsibility for that completely because I am a leader. I'm supposed to be trying to fix the issues, not just take responsibility for them. Canaris' eyebrows rises. Have you now? That is certainly good to hear, though I would keep an eye out if I were you. Commoners lack the sense of finesse that we of more elevated background often take for granted. Your commanding officer rolls his wheelchair up to you. I shall enter your swift reaction to the situation in my report. However, I shall expect a better performance from your men the next time you are sent into battle. The Duke looks away for a moment, and when he turns back to you, his expression is set. With your report in mind, I shall do my best to give you the time to resolve the lingering issues within your squadron. I can, of course, make no guarantees regarding orders from His Majesty, but it will likely be months before you will be sent into battle again. I'll expect a report of greater success from you when that time comes. To stumble once is regrettable. To do so twice, with time to prepare, is unpardonable. Am I made clear? Absolutely clear, sir, you respond. The implication couldn't be more obvious. You must return with the victory, or else. Canaris nods, his expression clearly pained at the harshness of his own ultimatum. Very good, Captain. You are dismissed. So we're going to need results. We're going to need to achieve some better things here. So, you step out of your regimental commander's office with a renewed sense of purpose. With the uncertain reprieve you've been given, you must forge your squadron into an effective fighting force. You do not even make it out of the corridor before you run into a familiar sight. Thin, olive skin, hawk nose, and angular, almost unchanged since the last time you saw him over 3 months ago. Unchanged, save by the red expanse of scar tissue down the left side of his face, where an Antari warhammer had raked him at Blagia. He greets you as he approaches, Sir Caius de All Casarosa, your acquaintance from training, fellow dragoon officer, and your friend? No, not your friend. A sometime ally who happens to wear the same uniform as you, and sometimes you wonder at the exact nature of the cold, analytical cipher living within the dragoon's tunic. Captain Dracone, good lord, Captain Dracone, it is good to see you, that you remain well. The other officer hesitantly replies as you greet him. You've returned from a sortie to the north, is that not so? How did your new unit fare? You tell Casarosa of the debacle from which you and your squadron have just returned. I see, the other dragoon says as you finish your recounting. Most regrettable. I too have had difficulties regarding the men of my new command. Casarosa had been made captain and knighted after Blagia on the same day you had, by the direct order of the king himself. However, unlike you, he is unlikely to rise any higher. He was born as a result of the illicit union between his Bane-blooded mother and a commoner. The result was an offspring of Bane-blood heritage, but with none of its associated powers. A deaf-born bastard. Casarosa's unfortunate mother paid for her indiscretion with her life, and as the result of her crime, Casarosa himself had suffered its consequences for all of his. It was only due to his exceptional skill with the saber and pistol and the patronage of his mother's powerful husband, the Earl of Lyon's court, that he had been able to acquire a commission at all. That he had been able to make the captain based on merit alone was even more extraordinary. Now, though, the way up is barred to him. No dragoon major would be willing to sell his commission to a deathborn, no matter how renowned. You can imagine that the prospect fills the other officer with no small amount of bitterness. However, now is not the time to be contemplating the nature of a man when he stands right before you. His eyes meet yours, flinty, as always, as if expecting a question in reply. What difficulties have you had with your command? The other officer almost seems caught off guard by your question. I beg your pardon? After Blagia, Casarosta had been promoted to command what was left of 3rd Squadron, your old unit. It too had taken immense losses during the battle, both those troops which followed Captain Elson into his suicidal charge and those who stayed behind in the desperate defense of the Terran left flank. If I'm not mistaken too, you can choose whether or not you want to actually go into that fight. I don't think you can win it either way. And I think Captain Elson dies one way or another. So, and I think if I'm not mistaken, you die one way or another, unless you just retreat. But yeah, I think you can't survive that thing one way or another. I haven't actually tried it, but I did see a couple guides online, and I think it, in every single situation, I don't think it ever came up where you chose that particular route. So it never works or whatever. So yeah, I don't think you can actually win that. And I think if I remember correctly from one of my old playthroughs, I tried it and I died. And that's even with like high soldiering and stuff like that. So I could be wrong about that. I'm not sure. I would have to look it up because again, it's been a while since I looked up that route. But yeah, I think you die if you choose that route unless you retreat. And I think Davis de All Elson still dies one way or another. So anyway, you said that you've had difficulties with your command, you explained. Might I inquire the detail? The other officer nods. Of course, 3rd Squadron is short a great deal of things, chief among them carbines, saddles, and horses for the men. It appears, it gives you a pointed look, that your command has received higher priority for such supplies than mine. You nod. That makes sense, though the men in charge of provisioning the king's army ostensibly give priority to more effective units. You have no doubt that the Bane-blooded officers in charge would be more willing to supply a squadron led by one of their own over a unit commanded by a Deathborn. However, Casarosa continues, our chiefest shortage has been in men. While I do have a corps of veterans at my disposal, the number of replacements I have available are only enough to raise 3rd Squadron to half strength. Worse yet, the new men are taking to both military discipline and their assigned duties poorly. You've nodded in sympathy. It seems that despite the dismal level of readiness within your own unit, you're still the lucky one. At least 6th Squadron is still nearly full strength, even after the minor losses you took. Huh. What are you here for? Gazarosa looks to the side as you ask. You mean at regimental headquarters? You nod. I'm here to request that His Grace enter my squadron into consideration for any further active duties which may come up. Casarosa replies. Your eyes widen a little at that. Active duties is a rather silly euphemism attached to combat patrols, raiding duties, and deep reconnaissance. In short, anything liable to get men killed, especially untrained, unprepared men. Are your men quite prepared for that? You find yourself asking almost involuntarily. Casarosa shrugs. Perhaps not, but we shall not know for sure until they are put to the test. After all, men do not become veterans by training alone. Better that a few die in minor skirmishes than face the prospect of throwing my entire untrained command into battle at our next time of crisis. You nod. You suppose Casarosa has a point. I mean, he does, but at the same time, it's just like, I would rather have these few little skirmishes than to be in an actual full-blown battle or be given the orders to go into a full-blown battle, and then you got a bunch of untrained men who are going to shit themselves and run. So, good day to you, Sir Caius. Casarosa responds with a curt nod and passes you by. It is not a long walk to your lodgings, but in the late afternoon, the streets of Naringia are packed with the men of the king's army. Before the war, the small port on the southern coast of Antar had been home to 12,000 people. Now, even with most of the original inhabitants gone and after the loss is taken at Blagia, the place houses 3 times that number of soldiers, clerks, supernumeraries, and the mob of camp followers, peddlers, and shady businessmen that invariably follow an army at war. You require the better part of half an hour to jostle, shove, and squeeze your way through the mobs of line infantry orange, dragoon gray green, and navy blue. When you finally arrive at the small but comfortably appointed room assigned to you as your personal lodgings, you find a folded sheet of paper sealed with wax waiting on your desk. It's from your father. The seal in the wax is unmistakable. It bears the ornate coat of arms of a noble house, your noble house, imprinted in a soft red material. The seal was stamped by the signet ring that your father wears as the Baron of Aldershall, Reddingfield, San Loren, Esenbrook, or none of these. So yeah, that's the other thing. In Guns of Infinity, this is where you kind of start getting into the politics of things and the future as far as your family and things like that is going to start being written. So you're going to have to think about things like that. As far as the name of my barony, I've never actually really had a name for a barony. Usually, or a name of like the place that House Dracone comes from. Later on, House Augustus. Give me a second while I think of something. But yeah, I'll be back in a second. Give me a moment. All right, so I've actually now come up with a name for our barony. I decided to pick the asshole nation from Suzerain, Roomberg. This will be the barony of Roomberg. I mean, they have that kind of British feel to it and stuff like that. Plus, I have great dreams of expansion and stuff like that later on. Who knows? Maybe in the next game or later on, I might be able to take over the kingdom and stuff myself. It's funny because when I think about it, like, on the one hand, I would love to stay loyal to this and become, ruling family and my family be great and stuff like that. But I also know how I am. I love to be just a dictator and stuff like that. And it's going to be tempting at some point. So we'll see how it goes. Let me see. Anywho, you pick up the letter immediately and unfold it, your mind awash with feelings of, I'm going to have my family be a good family. Because you can choose, you're going to have different levels of interaction with your family. So for instance, right here, you see, I can have one of excitement. I want to know what news my father has sent to his most beloved son. Trepidation. My father and I have an often strained relationship. Or confusion. My father barely even spoke to me. So yeah, that's kind of the routes that you can have because again, you're going to set up pretty much everything for your family. So in this case, I'm going to have my family be, they love their son and the rest of their family and stuff like that. But yeah, so excitement for my dear beloved father. Writers and romantics so often say that it is killing or property or lying with a woman that makes a boy into a man. Those penny pendants speak naught but nonsense. In the first years of your life, it had been your father who taught you the ways of the saddle, the sword, and the pistol. It was with him that you went hunting upon your family's ramshackle estate. It was he who taught you the meaning of honor and how to speak, stand, and behave as a gentleman. War, wealth, sex, none of those things made you a man. It had been your father, still standing tall and infinitely wise in your mind's eye, that had made you a man. In addition, news from your father means news from the rest of your family. What of the rest of your family, anyhow? What do you remember of them? Your mother, for example. And I typically always have a close relationship with my mom in these games. Sometimes I would kind of balance it with like, maybe I might have a situation where I don't like my dad, but my mom love her to death, or I might have it in reverse where the mother is kind of cold. But typically I usually have my mom being, the inspiring figure in my life. Again, because I love my mother to death in real life. So yes, the Lady Augustus is quite an inspiration in my life. So my mother and I are quite close. Your mother must still be worried about you, but no less than you worry about her. After all, she is in her elder years now, and her health is a constant concern of yours. What else? What of your siblings? Have you siblings? So yes, you can choose to have siblings. You can have a younger brother and sister, or you can have a younger sister, or be an only child. Now, I'm going to choose the younger brother and sister just because I kind of know how certain things are going to play out later on, but also just generally speaking, assuming that at some point in time, I'm going to have to deal with the politics of the family. You know, you want the heir and the spare, and you also want someone you can marry and stuff like that. So, you know, it would probably behoove me to have a younger brother who could possibly, you know, take the reins if something bad happens to me, or he can kind of be like a second, or as a possible suitor to someone else. And it's the same with my sister. You know, if I can turn around and, you know, who knows, through whatever reasons, become the leader of the family because I am the eldest, you know, it's nice to have a younger sister that you can marry off. Hopefully it'll turn out better than what happened to the Lord Darren Bronte. Unfortunate situation what happened to that young man. Anywho, I have a younger brother and sister. Yes, a brother and a sister, both just entering adulthood, you remember now. You open the letter and set it down on the desk, pausing only to light a candle to hold back the advancing gloom of sunset. Then you sit down and read it. My beloved son, one could not encompass how much of a good lord. One could not encompass how much of a direct shock our army's late defeat at Blasio was to us. I must admit that I was in a state of great distress for an extended time, not knowing if you were alive or slain. Thus, one might be able to understand the joy I felt when we received news of your survival and recovery from wounds. That you were able as well to cover yourself with glory was a second blessing, apt to turn a moment of thanksgiving into one of celebration. The saints have watched over you, my dear boy, and for that I shall be thankful to them evermore. No, oh God, excuse me. Know that your mother prays for your safety with each passing day, and that we must sorely await the very hour that you return to us, whole in mind and body. Oh, excuse me, my God. Your brother has expressed his intentions to join the king's army in emulation of your own shining exploits. Your sister continues to search for eligible suitors. Unfortunately, our current lack of funds renders both rather unlikely. I'm afraid that our family's acute lack of funds may become a constant shade over our heads in the future. This war has not been kind to our financial state. Some of our tenants have left to take up the king's arms, and the increased rates of taxation have also forced many others to leave for the cities, where more work might be found. The result is that the income of our estate has dropped greatly to the point where it might barely pay the interest on our debts. While any aid of your part would be most welcome, I must state without equivocation that one must not beggar oneself to pay the debts of his father. I trust your good judgment in this situation, but if you have the money to spare, it shall be most welcome. Regardless of your decision on the matter, I am proud to remain your father. Oh, that's sweet. I think in one of the playthroughs I had where my father didn't like me, it just was like a really short letter, and it just was like, yeah, I need money, and you know, fuck you. That's pretty much how the whole letter was. But yeah, that's actually a sweet one. I don't think I remember that from the original playthroughs that I had, because I always tend to go for the more roguish types and, you know, doing bad things and stuff. And I can assure you that I was not a national hero as I am in this one. So he hides it well, but it is clear that your father is distressed over your house's debt. Perhaps you might manage to offer some small relief through your own not inconsiderable income. Additionally, despite how much you might wish it, your father will not live forever. One day he will ride with the saints and you will become Baron Rumberg. His debts will become your debts. Paying some of those debts off now might help later. Now, typically, I think as I have always done in these playthroughs, I turn around and try to pay it off right off the bat. I am not going to do that because it always screwed me every single time. And I'll reveal later on the reason why. Actually, you know what? I won't. Well, because of the way promotions in this game work, you have to pay for them. So I'm gonna try and save some of my money. And there's also some other things that I didn't get a chance to play with. But you know, we'll deal with those when those events actually come up. I should be able to get them this time around if I'm not mistaken, but I want to play with those different things. But I'm not going to turn around and give that much money right off the back. I will give some. Also, something to keep in mind, this does come up in Lords of Infinity. So that's going to be really interesting because I have played one other game where you have to kind of manage an estate and stuff like that. It was called Lords of Aswick, I think it was called. It was one of the games that I was actually going to put in the poll for what choice of game that I would play. And it's also a really good game. There's also a second game that's being worked on, if I'm not mistaken. I'm not sure what's the current situation with that, but you have to manage an estate. So, yeah, that's something that you're going to have to do. And that's one of the big focuses in Lords of Infinity. Sorry to spoil things or whatever. But, you know, again, we'll deal with that when we get there. But, yeah, I'm just going to say I have expenses too. I'll send back just 5 crowns a month. Because right now I have what, 30? Yeah, I have 30. But I have a wealth of 580. But there are some things that are going to come up that I do want to spend money on. So we'll deal with that later on. So 5 crowns it is. 5 crowns is hardly a small sum. A cornet of dragoons is paid no more than that every month. Although your salary is as a captain is now far greater, your higher rate of pay comes with commensurate increases in expenses that you must manage. Boy, do I ever know that. That is the one thing that seems like the story of life. You turn around and make more money, and you have to end up spending more money. So it's not fun. You doubt the money you send will make a great difference, but at least it is better than nothing. You fold up the letter again, reach for your pen, and begin drafting a reply. And I wonder what this reply is going to be like. Oh, that's right, I don't get to read it. So, but, you know, I love my father, and I love my family, so I'm pretty sure it's going to be a great reply one way or another. Anywho, let's see here. Weeks pass and turns into months. The burning heat of the Antari summer turns into the mild breezes and heavy rain of autumn. Staff Sergeant Lanzaro puts his plans into motion. Over the following days, you see a few more of your men wearing freshly sewn sergeants and corporal stripes. The improvement isn't dramatic. The new NCOs are still the best of a bad lot, but you do see some small changes for the better here and there. Then one day, not a week after the first killer frost of the winter, you are summoned to the Army's headquarters building. Waiting for you there are 4 men bearing the sigil of the Order of St. Joshua and a large, carefully padded box. The liveried men, Seekers of the Red, take an hour to undo all but one of the multiple seals warding the box. The last one is carefully warded, a bane trap designed to fatally incapacitate any who touch it, save you. With some difficulty, the Seekers assist you in undoing the last safeguard. Then the box is open. Inside, mounted upon a wooden cross-shaped stand, sits a full suit of gleaming plate armor and a padded arming doublet to absorb heavy shocks and prevent chafing, complete with mail patches to cover gaps in the plate. Next to the armor is a second stand carrying a finely made, broad-bladed longsword and a black leather scabbard. To your bane-blooded eyes, both are marked with intricate patterns of acid-etched runes, glowing with the pale blue light of the Bane. They are the armor and weapon of a knight of the Order's militant, and you know full well that both have been tailored to fit your body exactly. In a closed room, the 4 Seekers, servants of the knightly order which the king inducted you into nearly a year ago, help you put on your armor for the first time. The process takes another 10 minutes, but the armor itself is surprisingly comfortable. Save for the claustrophobic darkness of the heavy plumbed helm, you could almost feel as if the armor was a second skin, one which renders you impervious to most mundane weapons, including musket fire at any range beyond 15 paces. It is only when you're fully clad head to toe in a skin of enchanted steel that the Seekers present you with the sword, your sword. Your gauntlet hand fits the leather grip perfectly, and the blade draws from its scabbard as smoothly as silk in a summer breeze. The instant the sword clears its sheath, the runes on the blade flare with a sudden intensity. Then, as your bane sense begins to tug at your mind and edge your vision in green, the blade bursts into a brilliant orange flame. The sword's balance is perfect, and the heavy blade feels deadly in your hand as you take a few experimental swipes, facing away from the 4 religious servants. You feel agile and powerful as you handle the massive sword one-handed. You barely feel the weight of the armor at all. You know of the power of Bane-hardened armor and Bane-ruined weaponry from personal experience. The former provides phenomenal protection, and the latter can penetrate even Bane-hardened armor. let alone comparatively trivial obstacles like stone, wood, or people. However, you have no doubt that your enemies would know this too. Going into battle in a big, clanking, shining suit of armor with a flaming sword in hand might as well be an open invitation to your enemies to try to kill you first. With that in mind, how often do you plan on using your new nightly equipment? Well, another one of these things too. Typically in my other playthroughs, I would have my armor all the time, because I tend to have playthroughs where my character is a lot stronger too, as well. I'm not going to do that this time around. And I'm also going to do it on a case by case basis, because I think if you actually do choose it here, you will wear this stuff every single time. So, and it doesn't give you the choice to actually not do it, but I will decide on a case by case basis. Indeed, although there will be situations where a flaming sword and bulletproof plate may prove useful, there are also ones where such assets become hindrances. A loud, obvious suit of armor would certainly not help if you needed to ambush the enemy or sneak about. Hint, hint, wink, wink, foreshadowing. You make arrangements to have the armor added to your allotment of personal baggage to be carried with your squadron's pack animals on campaign. It is in the month of 608 that a convoy of warships carrying the ensign of the Royal Terran Navy sails into the scudded waters of Naringia's harbor. On board are replacements for the line infantry, new guns for the artillery, and most preciously of all, a score of bright young officers in the gray-green tunic of the Royal Dragoons. Out of the 20, Kazarosa's 3rd Squadron is to receive 7. Another 6 are bound for the Lieutenant Colonel Keen's 1st Squadron. The remaining 7 are for your own 6th Squadron. After being the sole commissioned officer in a squadron of nearly 200 men for nearly a full year, the relief you feel as your new subordinates report in is palpable. Unfortunately, of the 7 new officers you receive, not all are suitable. Only 3 are lieutenants fit to command the 5 troops that your squadron is divided into. The remaining 2 troops will have to be commanded by cornets, bright, newly minted boys with a life of potential but precious little experience. With each section of your command now led by its own officer, your men begin to show improvement very quickly. Over the few months, your squadron becomes better drilled, more spirited, and even begins to redirect any resentment over punishments and long exercises from you to their new junior officers. You also take the time to appoint a personal servant. The commanders of infantry companies and cavalry squadrons are permitted to retain an enlisted attendant or batman to see to your personal needs in exchange for easier duties and a substantial pay bonus. You pick out one of the more loyal of your men, a Corporal Marion, to serve in this purpose. You soon find that having someone else available to shave you, see to your uniforms, and prepare your tea makes life much easier. Okay, kind of getting some status now, even though, we might lose this freaking war, but whatever. As the season turns once again and your officers settle into their duties, you find yourself facing another decision. When you were the only commissioned officer in the squadron, you led the entire unit as a unified command. Now, with each troop led by a commanding officer of its own, you must choose which troop to accompany into battle should you ever be deployed separately. In addition, the commanding officer of the troop you pick would be one most likely to be at your side on the field. You spend some time going over your officer's strength and weaknesses. The 2 cornets commanding their own troops are too inexperienced for the job, which leaves you 3 lieutenants. First, there's Lieutenant Sanderel, commander of the 1st troop, a lanky figure with a stooped back and glasses. Every day, he reads lines of Kian philosophy and whatever that is, poetry to his men before they drill. One would think that such a habit would make him an object of ridicule among his men, yet the dragoons under his command seem to respect and even almost like their soft-spoken, bookish officer. Second, there is Lieutenant Blaylock, commander of 3rd Troop, a powerfully built young man who joined the army after he had been thrown out of Artorias Royal University for dueling. Oh, he sounds like Auden. Abrasive and often crude, you must admit that the young man is an exceptional swordsman, a crack shot, and a gloriously skilled equestrian. Lastly, there is young Lord Reynard, or rather Reynard de All Finley, the Duke of Canaris' eldest son and commander of 4th Troop. He is slim, dashing, and possesses a personal magnetism that even you find hard to resist. His aristocratic upbringing has made him eloquent and a fine horseman. He is also, unfortunately, profoundly dense. Which troop do you decide to attach yourself to? Oh boy. Oh, none of these are really good. Oh boy. The thing about this though is that I am a better officer. So I don't need to have the greatest person to accompany me. Also, Reynard is the Duke's son. So I feel like if I don't go ahead and have him by my side, he's probably going to get himself killed. And he's probably not going to learn anything and end up screwing up in the long run. Whereas these other ones, yeah, Blaylock is a fighting douche, but he's a fighting douche. And at the end of the day, he'll be able to lead his men. Lieutenant Sandoval's the same thing. He's smart, bookish, but he'll find his way. This one will not find his way. He will find his way to a ditch or a grave. So maybe it'll be kind of a good thing to have him by my side, whereas I can kind of, help him gain some experience and stuff like that. And hopefully he won't get himself killed and then I'll get blamed for it. So let's pick Lieutenant Finley. And also, there's also the fact that he's the Duke's son, which will help me out politically at some point too. And I do have to think about that as well. Starting the next day, you begin attending drill exercises with Lieutenant Finley's 4th Troop. You can sense the devotion which young Finley's men feel towards him almost immediately. In a way, the lieutenant is almost a perfect officer from the point of view of a man under his command. He is a bold and inspiring figure with a razor wit, as well as the will and proficiency needed to lead his men on exercise by example. Interesting. He sounds like someone else I know that got himself killed. Davis, Elson. He also lacks the great affliction which strikes most junior officers, the belief that he knows better than even the veteran common soldiers under his command. The young lordling is just smart enough to realize how stupid he can often be, and so he defers constantly to both you and his sergeants. It is a good habit to have as a junior officer, but you cannot help but worry about the effect it might have upon his confidence as an officer. That's actually pretty interesting. So he actually might live longer than Elson, because I always felt like, while I did like Elson by the time he died, one of the big issues I had with Elson was that he always wanted these gallant things, and he always, even towards the end of the war, after he had been through so much, he still wanted these gallant charges and stuff like that. And it's just like, well, yeah, you lead gallant charges, but you die, and that doesn't help anybody. So, it kind of reminds me of when I used to play Samurai Warriors, and there was one moment in there where Nobunaga Oda was being defended by Renmaru, who was willing to sacrifice himself in order to save Nobunaga. But in it, Nobunaga was just like, well, it doesn't do me any good if you die in the process. It doesn't save anybody because I could still die. So he told him to live and, of course, fight very hard and stuff like that, which he in turn did. So that's kind of the thing about Davis to all Elson that I kind of felt like was kind of ironic, is that, like, yeah, you're going to turn around and be all gallant and stuff, and then you're going to get yourself killed, and that doesn't help anybody. But, okay. All right. Thuringia swells with the fresh reinforcements as the season begins to turn once again. Regiments that had been devastated after Blagier are once again at near full strength. Indeed, even the losses you took in that first action as squadron commander a year ago have been entirely made good. However, despite the rejuvenated state of the army, His Majesty, in direct command of his armies, refuses to take the field. Instead, he merely sends out enough forces to maintain control of the small strip of the southern forest under the Tierran control. The bulk of the army remains in Thuringia training. Surely you must have an opinion on that. With our ranks refilled, we should be attacking. Blagia must be avenged. I'd rather not try to second guess the decisions of my monarch, or we need the extra time to train and make ready. I mean, yeah, we do. But then also at the same time, we do need to start doing stuff. However, I'm not Davis. I'm not going to be running out of here and just being like, oh yeah, let's just do a full-blown attack against an enemy in their own land. I'm sure that'll be fine. So yeah, we need the extra time to train and make ready. Absolutely. There is certainly a difference between freshly raised units and a well-drilled troops. It takes weeks, even months of such training to turn a mob of civilians with uniforms and muskets into a real fighting force. The extra time is a blessing if you view it that way. Still, perhaps the king has his own plan as well. I really hope so. I think the one thing about the king too is that he does seem like he's at least somewhat kind of aware of the situation that's going on. He may not be the brightest and he may want a gallant end and all this stuff, but he does seem at least somewhat aware of what's going on and realize he can't have his way. But, hopefully his cleverness will help out if indeed he is clever. Soon, winter comes again, a particularly harsh one this time. For the first time since you arrived in Antar, you witness Naringia covered in thick blankets of snow. The sheer amount of the stuff on the ground makes any sort of equestrian drills or marching exercises impossible. It is only through the efforts of some of the line infantry units roped into clearing the roads with shovels that the town is able to function at all. As a result, your men are restricted to practicing close order drill in the cleared squares of land set up specifically for that purpose, along with musketry practice. It is during an instance of the latter that you notice something of a problem. The king's regulation demand that each soldier in service be capable of firing 3 rounds a minute from their weapons in any weather. While such requirements were somewhat loosened in the frantic months after Blagia, Grenadier Square seems once again insistent that this basic standard be met, enough to send inspectors to each company and squadron of each regiment. Your squadron is not to be inspected for another 2 weeks. However, you can already see that the men are not up to the job. While you've always been confident in your ability to fire 4 shots a minute on a good day, your men are less able. The veterans can generally work their carbines fast enough, but most of your men are still short. Worse yet, a few can barely even manage their second shot before time runs out. Surely, if your squadron is to pass the upcoming inspection, you must do something. Let me see. I order extra drills until all the men can get it right. I offer rewards for the fastest shots in the squadron. I find some way to speed the reloading process. Hopefully the problem will work itself out. Well, that's probably not a good attitude to have, but I think extra drills always work. So, that, yeah, that'll probably end up working. Let's see. Offer rewards for the fastest shot. I don't want to spend money. I find some way to speed the reloading process. I don't trust my intelligence that much. Plus, I think that might be one of those cases where it might help my intellect, but it doesn't necessarily help my unit at all. So yeah, I want to focus on things that's going to help my unit. So let's go and order the extra drills. Good Lord, I'm starting to mess up. All right. Starting to mess up. I've been messing up. You give the order, effective immediately. After a dragoon in your squadron is, every dragoon in your squadron is to practice working their carbines until they are able to fire 3 rounds a minute. Thus, every day in rain or snow and bitter cold or biting wind, the less proficient members of your squadron are sent out into the Antari winter, spending hours going through the laborious process of loading and firing their weapons over and over again. It is not a solution that makes you particularly liked, but it works. When a day of the inspection comes, your squadron, bearing a few customary misfires, manages 3 volleys in a touch under 55 seconds. With your officers handling much of the daily administrative duties of your squadron, and Corporal Marion dealing with your personal chores, you find yourself in possession of a great deal of free time over the long winter. You make an effort to spend most of that free time productively, primarily focusing upon self-improvement. I seek to improve my skills in all aspects. Writing. I begin working on an account of my experiences as an officer. Social advancement. I socialize and associate with senior officers. Observation. Specifically, I go off and see how Kazrosa is handling his unit. Broadening my horizons. I learned the Antari language. Or, if I was smart enough, I could have honed my understanding of Antari language if I had already done that. Or I could focus on my squadron. I closely supervise drills and exercises, offering advice when needed. I don't want to I don't want to hover over my squadron too much because I feel like the other officers under my command need to kind of do that too in order to gain some experience and stuff. As far as self-improvement goes, I mean, my stats aren't terrible. So, and since the game doesn't do like a huge reduction in your stats, the only thing it really does is the reputation. I think I won't do anything with that. I am interested, however, in writing because I could probably sell that later on, and that might get me some monies. And monies is still very valuable, and I think money is more of an impact, has more of an impact in this game than it did in the first game, because I think the only thing you really spend money on in the first game is your commission, and I think the horse. And yeah, you can be in some pain and sadness if you don't have enough money in those situations. And of course, you can use money in order to turn around and encourage your men and stuff like that. But yeah, those were the only real situations that you had. Whereas in this game, not only does your money affect, of course, whether or not you can get promoted later on and stuff like that, but I think it also affects the situation of your estate, which also then in turn ricochets into Lords of Infinity. So I will focus on the writing, so hopefully that will increase my intellect, but also in turn, maybe I can sell that stuff later on and, get a nice amount of money from that. So you spend the better part of your days hunched over a desk, pen in hand, working on a comprehensive recounting of your years at war. You try to tell the tale of your experiences as truthfully as you can without either bitterness or the idealistic gloss so common to pedestrian three-volume romances. You write of the glory of victory, yes, but you spare no detail when it comes to describing exactly what that glory must inevitably cost. At the beginning of spring, you have 200 or so pages filled with your memories. Good Lord. I don't think I've ever written that much. I mean, I used to keep journals and stuff like that when I was younger, but I didn't write that much, and I did keep some stories and stuff like that. But good Lord, I don't think I had 200 pages over the course of my entire life in a journal. But all right. It is in the latter part of the spring of 609 that His Majesty finally gives the order for the army to deploy. The king's plan is not a complex one. One half of the army under the command of the Duke of Havenport is to besiege the fortified port city of Caringia to draw Mikhail of Corbierd's army west. The second, under your sovereign's personal command, is to strike northwards while Corbierd is distracted, defeating any other Antari armies led by lesser commanders and carving out a foothold in the open expanse of Antar's central plains. The plan is an exceptionally daring one. Were something to go wrong, it would mean the complete destruction of both separate halves of the Tiaran army. But success would mean the seizure not only of a major port city, but a chance to take control of much of the League's agricultural heartland. Unfortunately, you are not to be a part of it. As the other two squadrons of the Royal Dragoons leave with Havenport's army, you and your men are given direct orders to remain in Thuringia and maintain readiness for separate duties. The reprieve is a welcome one. The extra time would be used to train your men further, and you have little desire to fight another glorious bloodbath like Blogia. Foreshadowing. Several months later, at the very height of summer, another naval convoy arrived at Thuringia. However, this time the ships do not unload a cargo of men and supplies at the docks. Instead, the men aboard carry off immense wooden boxes, dozens of them, each easily capable of fitting a grown ox. The boxes are heavy, too. It takes 12 draft horses to pull the heavy wagon carrying each of the boxes from the docks. From there, the boxes are carried off to one of the fortified warehouses built along the harbor by the engineers in the first years of the war. You hear no more of the boxes then. Almost nobody you ask seemed to know what the boxes contained, and the few that do seem to know quickly change the subject. Perhaps it is the subject worthy of further investigation. Yeah, let's be a little nosy. Let's see what's in them. One day, you spend some time taking a discreet look at the warehouse where the mysterious boxes are stored. The first thing you notice is that the warehouse doors are shut, barred, and guarded. In front of the shut doors are no less than 12 men wearing neither the green-gray of the Dragoons and the burnt orange of the line infantry, nor the dark blue of the Navy. They do, however, carry swords on their belts and perfectly serviceable-looking muskets at their shoulders, with bayonets fixed. A closer look reveals even more drastic measures. The heavy wood of the warehouse doors glows with a faint light, and your mind begins to tug in a now familiar sensation. The doors are warded by bane casting, and any unauthorized attempt to open those doors would likely result in the interloper's swift demise. You're not getting any answers this way. A few days later, a uniformed runner appears at the door to your lodgings just as you are about to leave for the morning. The man hands you a note sealed with a wax and marked for your eyes only. You dismiss the runner and close the door before breaking the seal on the wax and reading the message. Sir Darren, your presence is required at regimental headquarters at the earliest convenience to receive your orders. You are not to speak to anyone of this message until you have done so. Canaris, needless to say, your plans for the day have just changed. All right, so we will deal with this and tackle this in the next video. We will see what the Duke of Canaris is up to. And let me see. Oh, that's for the attributes. But yeah, we're going to see how things are going to go and see if maybe we'll find out a little bit more about these mysterious boxes and what they're up to. God only knows in this game. So, anywho, thank you for watching. If you liked the video, like the video. If you want to see more content like this, subscribe. I have a lot of things on the channel, and I will have many other things in the future that I plan on playing. And hopefully soon I'll be able to get back into streaming. I've been wanting to do that. There's also been some other games that have been mentioned before. One of the subscribers mentioned something about Shadows of New York. If some people remember, I did a actual little quick look at it a long while ago. I think it was sometime in like November or October, where I did a quick stream of it, and I actually did enjoy it. I enjoyed it far more than I enjoyed Quarteries of New York. That game, you know, it's not the best game to jump into the Vampire the Masquerade series and stuff like that. And before that, I played a couple other Vampire Masquerade games. I played a couple of the mobile games. One of them was about a vampire, and I think the other one was about the mages. That one was interesting, but also not great. It was interesting how they did certain mechanics, of course, being on your mobile phone. But yeah, the story wasn't great. But yeah, I would be interested in doing Shadows of New York because it seemed pretty cool. I do hope that that doesn't devolve into having to do Courts of New York, because again, I don't want to do that one. It was not great, and I really, yeah, that ending, yeah, there are a lot of things about that game not great. But yeah, I'd be interested in turning around and doing Shadows of New York. Hopefully, if I can kind of get ahead on some of these other games, and with this game I'm playing, then that will allow me to have some time to, of course, maybe do something like a 2-game situation, or maybe I can do like a very long 2 or 3 part video for that game. I'm not really sure how long it is, but again, I have plans in the future and stuff like that for things like that, but it depends on how my schedule is and things like that. So anywho, if you have any questions, comments, concerns, leave them in the comment section. I am always around, and these messages do come to my phone or it gets on the computer, and I can definitely see it at some point in time, and I will respond to it as promptly as I can. But thank you for watching this video, and I will see you in the next one. See ya.